No one expected it. Not the media, not the courtroom, not even Pam Bondi herself. Karoline Leavitt walked into the hearing like a woman with nothing to lose and everything to prove. What she unleashed would leave the audience stunned, the judge speechless, and Pam scrambling for answers. By the time it was over, one thing was clear. Karoline didn't just win the argument. She buried Bondi's career beneath it. And she did it with one devastating truth. If you want to hear more stories like this one, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you will never miss a news story. Okay, let's get into it. The room was packed, shoulder to shoulder. Marble columns loomed over the gallery as journalists, politicos, and operatives crowded in, buzzing like flies around a fresh carcass. This wasn't just a hearing, it was theater, and the audience had come hungry. At the center sat Pam Bondi, the once untouchable former Florida Attorney General turned political power broker. Her blonde hair was styled to perfection, her blazer immaculate. She looked calm, confident, maybe too confident, flanked by high-priced legal counsel and press reps whispering into earpieces. She glanced at the cameras with a rehearsed smile that said, "You're all wasting your time." The hearing was officially titled, Oversight Review of Federal Data Integrity and Ethical Compliance. A mouthful. Bureaucratic camouflage. But insiders knew what this really was, a surgical strike. Whispers have been circulating for weeks. Leaked files, sealed memos, private surveillance contracts. And all of it pointed to one name at the center, Pam Bondi. Still, Bondi believed she could coast through. She'd faced tougher crowds before. Lobbyists, attorneys general, even Trump's inner circle. Compared to them, Congress was a retirement gig. But then the door opened. Karoline Leavitt entered alone. No entourage, no legal team, just a thin black folder tucked under her arm. Her stride was deliberate, calm, but predatory. She didn't glance at the press pool, didn't flinch at the shouted questions. Her eyes locked on one target, Pam. Bondi caught the stare and hesitated, just for a second, but the cameras caught it. Her eyes flicked down to the folder in Karoline's hands. Thin, unimpressive, but the way Karoline carried it, like a dagger. The chairman, an aging Republican with a fondness for backroom deals, barely looked up. "Ms. Leavitt, you have 5 minutes." Karoline didn't acknowledge him. She stepped up to the microphone, eyes still locked on Bondi. Her voice came steady and low. "I won't need 5. A few reporters chuckled nervously. Bondi smirked, whispering something to her lawyer. Karoline continued. "What I have to say today will not require explanation. It will not require commentary. It will not be spun by partisan nonsense or filtered through media interpretation. What I have is evidence, and it speaks for itself." She placed the folder gently on the table, opened it. Inside were exactly 3 documents. She slid the first one forward. A certified forensic audit signed by a former DOJ cybersecurity official. The second, an internal memo marked confidential in red. The third, a printed email chain between Bondi and a private data surveillance firm. Bondi's smirk faltered. Karoline leaned in. "Ms. Bondi, before we proceed, do you recognize this correspondence? Or should I read aloud for the American people?" The room fell dead silent. One thing was now undeniable. Pam Bondi wasn't walking into a hearing. She was walking into an ambush. And Karoline Leavitt was already holding the trigger. Karoline didn't rush. She let the silence linger, let the weight of the documents sink in. Then she turned to the panel of congressional officials, her tone measured but cold. "This story begins, as most of these scandals do, in the shadows. But it ends right here, in public view." She walked the room through a sequence of events that painted Pam Bondi not as a negligent bureaucrat, but as a knowing architect in a massive, unconstitutional surveillance scheme. Her words were crisp, methodical. She wasn't making accusations. She was presenting a case. And the more she revealed, the tighter the noose became. Karoline explained how, in the summer of 2023, a whistleblower from within the DOJ flagged an internal program known by its code name, Mirrorbox. The purpose? To scrape, store, and analyze private metadata from American citizens, without warrants. While the DOJ denied the program's existence, internal communications told another story. And, in the middle of those communications, Pam Bondi. Pam shifted in her seat. Her attorney leaned over and whispered urgently, but Karoline didn't stop. She projected an enlarged screenshot of an email onto the hearing room's main screen. The letterhead was unmistakable: Department of Justice, Office of Strategic Operations. The email was dated October 12, 2023, and it was addressed to Bondi. The subject line read, "Mirrorbox Phase 2, Media Suppression Targets." Karoline pointed at the screen. "This is not a conspiracy theory. It's a government official asking Pam Bondi how to proceed with a list of journalists and elected officials deemed problematic." Included in the thread? My name. The room collectively inhaled. She turned directly to Pam. "You try to have me flagged as a digital threat. For what? Asking questions? Voting the wrong way? Or simply being inconvenient?" Bondi broke her silence. "This is taken out of context," she said, her voice firm but less confident now. "It was a brainstorming document. Nothing more." Karoline's eyes narrowed. A brainstorming document that led to the unlawful seizure of private emails from 5 journalists, 3 activists, and 1 senator. Bondi looked to her lawyer. He offered no help. Then came the real blow. Karoline held up a second email, this one from a private contractor employed through a gray area surveillance firm based in Virginia. In it, Pam Bondi authorized a payment under an internal fund known as EC-17, which, Karoline revealed, had no legitimate oversight or external audit trail. "I asked the committee," Karoline said, her voice ringing with force. "Why would a former attorney general funnel taxpayer dollars to a surveillance contractor using a fund hidden from public view?" The chairman leaned forward, visibly rattled. "Ms. Leavitt, are you suggesting direct misconduct?" Karoline didn't blink. "No, I'm proving it." Gasps echoed through the chamber. She returned to the mic. "This isn't just about me. It's about every American who was put under a digital microscope because someone in power didn't like their politics. And it all leads back to the woman sitting at this table." Pam Bondi sat frozen. No longer the queen of spin. The web had been spun, and Karoline had just illuminated every thread. The moment Karoline finished laying out her evidence, the room vibrated with unease. For the first time in the hearing, the spotlight had shifted. All eyes turned to Pam Bondi, not with admiration, but with suspicion. Her carefully composed expression cracked just enough to betray what everyone was thinking. She didn't expect this. But Pam Bondi wasn't a rookie. She hadn't risen through the ranks of American politics by folding under pressure. She took a steadying breath, leaned forward, and addressed the committee with the measured cadence of someone who'd spent her career avoiding the truth without ever telling a lie. "This entire presentation," she said, her voice calm and clipped, "is a political stunt. Ms. Leavitt has opposed me ideologically for years. She's taken to Twitter, to cable news, to rallies. And now, here she is again, trying to litigate her conspiracy theories in a federal hearing." There were murmurs of agreement from a few allies on the panel. Pam pounced on the opportunity. She's cherry-picked private communications, taken them out of context, and weaponized them for political gain. If this hearing is to remain credible, I urge the chairman to maintain order and demand proper evidentiary standards. The chairman raised an eyebrow, unsure whether to scold Karoline or praise Bondi for sounding like the adult in the room. But Karoline didn't flinch. In fact, she smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that," she replied, her tone shifting from prosecutor to tactician. "Because now I get to introduce Exhibit C." She tapped her folder again. A digital screen behind her lit up, this time with something far more serious than emails or memos. It was a text log, encrypted, time-stamped, and authenticated by not one, but 3 independent forensic analysts. The recipient, Pam Bondi. The sender, an internal DOJ contact. The message was short but explosive. "We need to bury the Leavitt file until post-2024. Use EC-17 if needed." Quietly. Karoline didn't need to add commentary. The message spoke for itself. The chairman leaned forward, his tone sharpened. "Ms. Bondi, do you deny receiving this message?" Pam tried to laugh. "This is preposterous. These texts could have been fabricated by anyone. I've never even heard of EC-17. Karoline stepped forward, eyes locked on her. "Then why did you authorize a $94,000 disbursement from EC-17's covert ledger to a third-party analytics firm just 4 days later?" Pam blinked. That hesitation, it was all the public needed. The gallery erupted in whispers. Reporters started scribbling faster. Even some of Pam's defenders began discreetly checking their phones, confirming the name EC, 17, and looking increasingly uncomfortable. Bondi tried to speak again, but the words didn't come. Her attorney leaned in, whispering something urgent. She waved him off. Too late. The narrative had changed. Karoline closed her folder and looked at the committee. This isn't about politics. It's about power abused, truth hidden, and citizens betrayed. She didn't come here today to tell the truth. She came here to control the fallout. But now, the fallout's already begun. Pam Bondi stared down at her notes, but there was nothing left to say. The hearing was no longer about Karoline's accusations. It was about Pam Bondi's survival. The chairman called for a 10-minute recess to restore order, but the room was already beyond control. A slow panic had begun to spread through the hearing chamber like smoke, quiet at first, but undeniable. Pam Bondi sat frozen, her posture rigid, eyes darting between Karoline and her lawyer. She thought she'd faced the worst of it. She was wrong. When the committee reconvened, Karoline stood back at the mic, hands behind her back, her expression unreadable. "Before we continue," she said, "I'd like to reintroduce a familiar name. One that's appeared in countless internal DOJ documents. One that shows up in nearly every email thread involving Mirrorbox and EC-17. The man who helped build the program that violated the rights of thousands of Americans." A hushed murmur rippled across the gallery. Karoline turned to the side door. "And today, he's chosen to speak." The door opened, and in stepped a man no one expected to see. Daniel Mercer, former deputy director of DOJ cybersecurity. Silver-haired, with sunken eyes and a quiet resolve, he walked slowly, deliberately, past the stunned audience and took the witness chair. Cameras clicked. Reporters scrambled to update headlines. Mercer hadn't been seen in public in over a year, not since the DOJ quietly phased him out during their internal restructuring. He was sworn in. The chairman looked skeptical. "Mr. Mercer, are you aware that your previous testimonies to this committee contradicted the evidence Ms. Leavitt has presented?" Mercer nodded. "Yes, sir. I lied." Under pressure, the room stilled. Karoline stepped beside him, addressing the panel. "Mr. Mercer has signed a federal affidavit and provided a full digital trail of his communications with Ms. Bondi during the Mirrorbox operation. What he's about to share will confirm everything I've told you, and more." Mercer cleared his throat. "We were ordered to escalate data collection on political targets. Not criminals. Not foreign threats. Americans. And that directive didn't come from the top of the DOJ. It came through a backchannel set up by Bondi and a select team she called the Echo Network." The term hit like a thunderclap. Bondi bolted upright. "That's a lot." Karoline turned slowly toward her. "Is it because you mentioned the Echo Network yourself in a voice memo from November 3rd? The same memo where you said, and I quote, 'We need to keep Karoline in the dark until we can shut her down quietly.'" The judge banged the gavel. "Ms. Bondi, you'll remain silent." Bondi's legal team huddled. One of her attorneys scribbled a note and slid it toward her. She didn't look at it. Meanwhile, Mercer continued. "Pam Bondi authorized the use of an Israeli-based surveillance firm, SignalX, to conduct off-the-books data extraction. They weren't bound by U.S. privacy laws. That was the whole point." The weight of Mercer's confession hit like a hammer. Karoline leaned toward the microphone, her voice like ice. "So let's be clear. This wasn't just a scandal. It was a coordinated digital coup against the American people." The committee room erupted. And Pam Bondi. She didn't say a word. When the committee reconvened after Mercer's bombshell testimony, the atmosphere was radically changed. The decorum was still there, technically. The suits, the gavels, the flags. But underneath it all, a new energy pulsed through the room. Everyone knew what was coming, and no one could look away. Karoline stood alone in front of the long, elevated bench. Bondi, visibly shaken now, had slouched in her chair, just slightly, enough for the cameras to capture it. Her lawyer whispered frantically in her ear. She didn't respond. Karoline opened a fresh binder. "Madam Chair, with your permission, I'd like to proceed with direct questioning." The chair, clearly rattled but trying to maintain order, nodded. "Granted. You may proceed." Karoline stepped toward Bondi, slowly, like a lion circling a wounded rival. "Ms. Bondi, Did you authorize a financial disbursement from the EC-17 account to SignalX on October 16th of last year? Bondi didn't speak. Her lawyer leaned into the mic. Objection to the question's premise. That transaction hasn't been authenticated. Karoline turned to the screen. A transaction record appeared, bearing Bondi's digital signature. Authenticated by 2 external forensic labs and the IRS Investigative Division, she said. Care to try again? Bondi cleared her throat. I don't recall making that authorization. Karoline's eyes gleamed. That's strange, because this email, from your government address, says otherwise. And here's your response. Transfer complete. Let's keep this offline. The gallery gasped. Ms. Bondi, Karoline continued, flipping to another page. Did you or did you not participate in a July 2023 call with 3 DOJ officials and a SignalX executive, in which you discussed digital disruption strategy for political influencers? Bondi hesitated. That wasn't the language I used. Karoline cut her off. We need to deplatform and drown out these people, she read aloud. Those were your exact words, according to the meeting transcript. Care to explain? I was referring to foreign bots. Except every name on the target list was American. Citizen. Law-abiding. Including pastors, suburban moms, and yours truly. Karoline turned to the panel. May I enter the names into the record? A nod. She rattled them off like a gun. Jacob Ramirez. Emily Sloan. Pastor Robert Keene. Senator Howard Gray. And over 120 others. Pam flinched to the last one. Karoline zeroed in. You targeted a sitting senator. Why? Pam's voice cracked. That list wasn't finalized. Karoline pounced. But you signed off on it. So again, why? Pam looked down. No answer. Ms. Bondi, Karoline said, each word a dagger. You didn't just violate policy. You broke federal law. You used taxpayer dollars to fund foreign surveillance on your own people. You weaponized the DOJ's resources for political revenge. And then you tried to bury it all with shadow funds and burner phones. Silence. You didn't just cross the line, Karoline said. You erased it. The chairwoman exhaled. Ms. Leavitt, that concludes your time. Karoline nodded, collected her binder, and returned to her seat. Pam Bondi remained frozen, an empty shell at the center of a public reckoning. And the crowd? They just witnessed history. It began with a tremble. Not loud, not dramatic, just the subtle shaking of a hand, Pam Bondi's right hand, twitching against the surface of the witness table. The camera zoomed in, catching it in high definition. Her pen rolled off the edge and hit the floor with a tiny clink that echoed like a gavel. For the first time in her career, Pam Bondi looked like she didn't know what came next. The hearing room, still charged from Karoline's relentless cross-examination, had settled into an eerie quiet. Everyone felt it. Something irreversible had just happened. This wasn't politics as usual. This wasn't a partisan hit job. This was a total collapse, in real time, of a woman once considered bulletproof. The chairwoman leaned in. Ms. Bondi, do you wish to respond? Pam opened her mouth. No words came. Would you like a moment? The chair offered, awkwardly. Pam nodded once. I need a break. The word break landed hard. Camera's word. Phone screens lit up in the gallery. Pam Bondi, who had made a career out of projecting unshakable authority, had just asked for a break in the middle of a federal ethics hearing. Karoline Leavitt, seated calmly across the room, didn't blink. She didn't need to say anything. She had already said everything. Bondi's lead attorney whispered into her ear again, but she waved him off. Then she reached for a tissue and dabbed her forehead. The illusion of control melting under the weight of evidence, exposure, and exhaustion. The chair signaled to the marshal, who escorted Bondi out a side door with her team. Her gait was slower now. Her heels clicked less confidently. She never looked back. Inside the hearing room, a buzz rose like a storm. One congressman whispered to another, "It's over. She's done." A journalist near the back typed furiously, pausing only to mutter, "This is Watergate level." Meanwhile, Karoline remained composed, flipping through her notes as if preparing for a board meeting. The contrast couldn't be clearer. She wasn't just a rising star anymore. She was the architect of Pam Bondi's public dismantling. Reporters swarmed the hallway. Clips of the hearing were already flooding the internet. A TikTok video of Bondi's silent breakdown had hit 1.2 million views in under 20 minutes. Cable news anchors broke in, with flashing headlines. Breaking: Bondi walks out under fire. Leavitt's evidence devastating. The chairwoman called a brief recess. As the room emptied, several committee members approached Karoline to shake her hand. A few, once her vocal critics, now mumbled quiet respect. Outside, protesters gathered, holding up signs that read, "No one above the law," and "Thank you, Karoline." A CNN anchor summarized it best on live TV. "What we're seeing here isn't just political theater. This is the moment Pam Bondi's credibility imploded under the weight of her own decisions." And Karoline Leavitt handed her the detonator. Bondi never returned that day. Her chair sat empty. And for the first time in a long time, accountability didn't just knock. It walked in wearing heels and a blazer. Pam Bondi never returned to the hearing. When the gavel struck the next morning to reconvene, her seat remained empty, just a polished nameplate and a microphone untouched. Her attorney submitted a letter citing acute medical exhaustion and stress-related symptoms, but no one in the room believed that was the real reason. The truth was simpler. Pam Bondi had been dismantled, not by a scandal, not by a leak, but by a woman she had tried to erase. Karoline Leavitt. With the world watching, Karoline stepped forward once more to address the committee. Her voice carried the same calm intensity as the day before, but now with something deeper underneath: vindication. "I didn't come here to gloat," she began, looking around the room. "I didn't come here to make headlines or score points. I came because, like millions of Americans, I'm tired of watching people in power break the rules and walk away clean. I'm tired of watching the powerful destroy lives and say it was just strategy." She paused, locking eyes with the chairman. Pam Bondi thought she was untouchable. She thought she could run back-channel operations, silence her opponents, and funnel taxpayer dollars into foreign surveillance firms, and never face the music. But yesterday, she heard it loud and clear. Outside the Capitol, the crowd had grown. Protesters, supporters, media trucks, all forming a sea of faces. The banner draped across the front steps read, "Justice has no expiration date." Karoline raised the final document into the air, a signed statement from DOJ's Internal Review Board, officially opening a full criminal investigation into the EC-17 fund and Bondi's private contracts. Cheers erupted from the gallery. Committee members leaned back, stunned. "This," Karoline said firmly, "is not the end of a hearing. This is the beginning of accountability." A reporter shouted from the back, "What do you say to those who still defend Bondi's record?" Karoline didn't miss a beat. "I say look at the evidence. And if you still defend her, you're defending corruption." Another asked, "Is Pam Bondi finished?" Karoline stared straight into the cameras. No smile, no bravado, just 6 words delivered with surgical precision. "She's done. It's over." Finally, the clip would go viral within the hour, played on every major news network, splashed across social media feeds, stitched into TikToks, analyzed in prime time. The phrase became a rallying cry. In the days that followed, Bondi's allies scrambled to distance themselves. Endorsements were pulled, contracts severed. The Florida bar announced an immediate review of her license. Conservative watchdog groups, even some she had once championed, called for her prosecution. But Karoline, she walked out of the chamber that day, not just as a rising star, but as a force of reckoning. She didn't just expose a scandal. She ended a legacy. And as the sun set behind the Capitol dome, one truth rang louder than the headlines. Pam Bondi's era was over. Karoline Leavitt had ended it, with a folder, a microphone, and an unshakable will. If you want to hear more stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you will never miss a video again.